Okay, this evening we have Laura Kimberly with us. She is a Texas Master Naturalist with the North Texas chapter and is passionate about entomology and prairie restoration. Through her work planting native flowers and grasses, she developed a deep appreciation for insects, especially flies. Since completing the Texas A&M AgriLife Volunteer Entomology Specialist training in 2017, she has pursued countless learning opportunities from college courses to podcasts. And as a community scientist and insect photographer, she advocates for flies and highlights the vital roles the insects play in our ecosystems. Please join me in welcoming Laura Kimberly.
Wow, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. It's going to be a jam-packed hour of joy of flies. So you're like, there's joy in flies? Well, I'm going to first tell you my story and how I came to find the joy in flies. There we go. All right, we're off. Scaly bee fly, Lepidophoria, Lepidoptera. First time I saw this fly, I was like, what are you? You're fuzzy, you're yellow and black, but I don't think you're a bee. You've got interesting antenna, but I don't think you're a moth. And then what's the deal with that fuzzy butt? And then I was like, oh, those eyes. Are you a fly? You are a fly. And thus began my inclination to notice the flies, changing my life. It brought out my curiosity. What is this insect? Can I figure it out? It gave my brain a way to stay young, studying up on who, what are you doing? What are you eating? How are you interacting? It gave me new hobbies like insect photography and community science. It motivated me to be more observant as I walked and hiked. I became attentive to details and movements. My friends say, how did you see that? It brought me new friends, those who appreciated insects and would talk to me about them. And by the way, thank you for being a captive audience tonight. It brought me new purpose to letting all my other friends and new friends know that most insects are really good and useful creatures. Before the scaly bee fly, if you'd asked me to name a fly, these would be the ones. Housefly, horsefly, kind of drab, dark, and dangerous. After the scaly bee fly, I see colors: yellow, brown, orange, green, and even blue, and patterns like checkerboards and stripes and obliques and curlicues and bristles and furs and fluff and other adornments. So I became attuned to not only their beauty, but to sort them out from other insects and to understand all their roles, the good behaviors and the bad, and their usefulness. I learned, don't be fooled by mimicry and misinformation, by their bad reputation, by just the adults you are more likely to see, by the questionable eating habits. That's really just from the human's perspective, right? So we're going to take a deeper look at the beauty and important behavior of flies. And there's actually a lot to like. From a practical standpoint, here's the goods. They pollinate. They provide pest control of other insects, including other flies. So they also play a role in maintaining the balance of species. They decompose organic matter, be that leaf litter, fallen trees and other vegetative matter, or carrion or dung, and thus they recycle nutrients. And they that's an important job of taking care of that dung and carrion. And they are food for animals up the food chain. When you get a fly under a microscope or a loupe or a macro lens, from an aesthetic point of view, they are colorful and adorned. And they also provide us with the entertainment of mimicry. Their purpose is to protect themselves from being eaten by predators, but that makes them fun brain teasers for us. So I brought with me today a set of charismatic flies. those that are photogenic and easy to appreciate, as well as those with interesting facts about their habitat or feeding habits. And I did bring a few others to acknowledge our complicated relationship with flies. And so we're going to touch on just a very few of the 140 families of flies. And then I threw in a few other insects to compare. That's that mimicry thing. So let's start out with a bit of fun with flies. So you might have gotten a piece of paper when you came in, and even if you didn't, you can kind of do this in your head. Here are 7 flies. You got 9 spaces on your piece of paper, but I've reduced it to 7 to make the photos better. Which are flies and which are not? Fly, not a fly. I'll give you about a minute. This is only for you. It's just some fun. And you can see what you pick up along the way. You okay? Yeah, I just was from this angle, and just was kind of from this angle, and it's kind of fuzzy. I was just making sure. Okay, you need more time? Are you good? Okay. So if the fun of flies is recognizing them, you got to know what makes a fly a fly, right? So starting with a fly is an insect. And how do you recognize an insect? So this is a little review of the basics of entomology. They have an exoskeleton. The parts of their body that provide structure are on the outside. They have 3 body parts: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. And the thorax, that, if I get this right, that middle section there is where all the locomotion comes from. That's where all the muscles are. They have 6 legs, 3 on each side. Every insect has those 6 legs. They may also have wings attached to that thorax. And most of the winged insects have 4 wings, 2 pair. But our flies, they are unique among the insects, just 1 pair of wings. It gives the insect order their scientific name, which is Diptera, Diptera, winged. And then Diptera includes critters that you may not normally think of as fly, like mosquitoes and midges, just 2 wings, so they are a fly, even if they drag down the good reputation of flies. But really, you know, when you draw it, you can see, oh yeah, 2 wings. That's what she drew. But honestly, you can tell. I mean, butterflies, yeah, that's easy. They got 4 wings. But sometimes when you look at a bee or a bug, or sometimes even a beetle, you're like, no, 2 wings or 4. So you can't always discern the number of wings. So we're going to focus on other parts of the anatomy to kind of get attuned to how you visually separate out a fly. And that is that they usually have large eyes in relation to their head. They're kind of bulbous, and they usually have small antennae. And that's usually with 3 parts, a pedicel, a scape, a pedicel, and then a little filament coming out of their antenna. But keep in mind that with insects, nothing is always. There are many exceptions. The only always is that there are exceptions. So as we go through here, those kind of things might fool you into thinking it's not a fly, as it almost did with me on the scaly bee fly. So they also have little halteres in the place where you might expect to see that second wing. These are remnants of their evolutionary process, and they do provide some stability and balance in flight. Some flies also have a cover over each haltere called a calypter, and you can see these, I think I get it right here, this little triangular milky looking piece of their anatomy. Not all flies have a calypter. Don't really know what the purpose of the calypters are because it's not well studied. And that's a fact about not just flies, but about insects. If they're not economically important, they usually don't do much studying of them. So when you read about calypters, like, don't really know. So since not all flies have calypters, though, it's you can separate flies into calyptrate and acalyptrate. So when you're doing fly ID, when you have at least that much information, you can at least separate them out. And anything you have that can help you ID a fly is good. So if you put a fly on iNaturalist, there's some that are pretty common that easily get ID'd, but there's a lot that don't. Fly ID is hard. But when you think about this, there are over 160,000 species of fly. The largest family, the Tupulidae, has the most species, over 14,000 species. Many of the families we will look at today have 4,000 to 8,000 species. So in the whole mammalian class, there may be 6,500 species, roundabout. The amphibians number 8,000. The birds jump up to 11,000 and includes those pesky gulls and sparrows. So, but flies contain 15 times that number. Separating them into subfamily, genus, and species is hard. So any clear morphological feature is immensely helpful. Beyond that, you're often like counting bristles and you need to examine reproductive parts. So, if you don't get your fly ID'd on an iNaturalist, I've learned to shrug that off. And there are a few other distinguishing features. Fly mouth parts. Flies mostly have what are called either piercing sucking mouth parts or sponging mouth parts. As adults, they mostly don't chew. They consume liquid if they eat at all. And they have some pretty cool ways of liquefying. You may have heard of the housefly's way, but we'll get into that a little later. So, if this will work. Nope, hang on. Not going to work. Okay. All right. The movie won't work. I had a movie of the fly dabbing there. No, that's its mouth part. That's a sponging mouth part. So this is a harmless fly on my thumb. So they do live life in two different phases, really egg, larva, pupa, adult, but we're going to talk about the two main phases. So what do I have up there? Oh, I need to go this way. This is that's what I get for, okay. During their early life, they're a bit more squishy and less mobile. Larvae don't have wings. Not only do they have no wings, they also have limited legs. And it's in this stage of their life where you have, if a pollinator, it's an adult. They're doing the pollination. But all those other services that flies provide are in the larval stage. They have different mouth parts than the adult, either biting or rasping mouth parts. They usually occupy a different food niche than the adult, either by what type of food source or by the habitat of the food source. And for many species, food consumption is very minimal at the adult stage. So it's in this larval stage we get those decomposer and pest control benefits for the most part. So this is the larva of the syrphid fly, commonly known as the flower fly or the hover fly. This female lays her eggs right in the midst of an aphid colony. So food is available as soon as it hatches. And the definition of a good mother in the fly world is how close to the food source did you lay your eggs. If you got it really close, good job, and you just fly off, and there you go. So I have this bucket list of insects and insect behaviors that I'd like to see. Seeing an aphid eating a larva was on it, and then it happened. Because if you stare at enough flowers long enough, you can see it. So I hope this movie will work. Okay. Yes, okay. Got about 10 seconds there. And it's, there you go. Actually, the full length of this video is 2 minutes and 40 seconds, but I didn't think y'all would want to watch it for that long. Okay, let's see if this movie will work. This is the nectar consuming adult. You can see that little dabbing mouth part right there, picking up a little nectar, maybe a little pollen for protein, because females need protein for egg production. They also like to get, oh, let's see if this will work. Let's see. Okay. And they can, this is why they have their name. That's the hoverfly hovering as it nectars. And then they also like to get some minerals like the sweat on your hand. So I was excited the day that this little fly kissed my hand. And you also notice that little behavior where it takes its legs and it wipes its mouth and wipes its eyes. Flies are very fastidiously at keeping clean, fastidious at keeping clean. They will take, maybe taking the minerals off their feet to their mouth or just keeping it clean. You'll also watch them clean their eyes. They don't have eyelids, so they've got to have some type of windshield wiper there. So these are the adult, the last few slides are the adults of the family in the family Syrphidae, the hoverflies. People that know me send me photos of these flies and say, what is this bee? And I love it when I get to say, it's a fly. And I get to say, they don't bite, and they're not capable of stinging. And they do pollinate, though. You can see the pollen that this fly in the middle is carrying on its thorax there. They're not widely known as efficient pollinators, but the syrphid flies are one group that does get studied for their pollination abilities. Bees, I will acknowledge, are more efficient as pollinators, but flies can do it too. And we have to remember that in the insect that pollinates the cacao plant, from which we get chocolate, is a dipteran. It's a midge, but it's in the Diptera. In addition to being mistaken for bees, they might get mistaken for wasps. This is a four-spotted aphid fly, mimicking a wasp right down to its little pinched waist. This is another fly where the larvae consume aphids. But the Syrphidae family has a good bit of diversity. Oops, yeah, I went there. In their eating habits. They're not just aphid eaters as larvae. These flies are in the family Aristolinae, and they are all decomposers as larvae, detrivores and decomposers, recycling nutrients and cleaning up. Because the larvae feed in muck and ponds, they need a way to reach the air for breathing. And so they have adapted with a long tail that functions as their breathing tube. And if you get squeamish, you might want to hide your eyes. But this is the larva. They're known as the rat tail maggots. I like to say they're rat tail larvae, and I like to think of it as just like snorkeling gear. But they do a good job. Here's the adult. The common name for this adult is a bare-eyed mimic, because it's a pretty good mimic of a bumblebee. The larvae feed on decaying organic matter in ponds and ditches and otherwise stagnant water. And there's the bumblebee model. Bumblebee has a little bit more hairy legs and hairy body, but except for the antenna, that's a pretty confusing little critter. Honeybee, fly. Another good mimic. This is a drone fly, aptly named for the male honeybee it seems to imitate. You get them side by side and you're like, oh, I can tell the difference. But if you see them singly, you may not. But this fly also, in addition to mimicking the look of the honeybee, it also mimics the behavior of the honeybees and the way they move back and forth from flower to flower. It's not, this particular hoverfly is not really the hovering type. You see that? What do you think? You think about a wasp, but then you begin to see the side view and then a better view. And you see the antenna, you see the eyes, and you can see little halteres right there. But it's a pretty good mimic of a wasp. This is the eastern hornet fly dressed up like a yellow jacket. It even mimics right down to the pigment, eye pigment, which mimics the face of the wasp. But you can tell it's a fly because the wasp has these little spiky legs that it uses to catch prey, and the fly just has smooth legs. So there's several, across several genera that in the flies, they mimic wasps. Some are better than others because, you know, this fly over here doesn't have the cool eyes. But their larvae all feed in decaying trees, often in holes of trees. These are flies too that you will hear them buzzing before you see them. They fly around sort of like angry wasps. But they're actually in folklore known as the good news bees, because if you find one flying around your face, it's supposed to be delivering good news to you. So yay. This fly is not a mimic, but it has those cool eyes, very cool eyes. It's called the wavy mucksucker. And that is because its eyes are wavy and its larvae feed in the muck. This fly is about 5 millimeters in length. So it's not very big. And you're not really likely to notice those eyes unless you took a picture of it and then cropped in on the eyes. But this fly, this picture was not, yeah, okay, that picture was taken in my front yard. The last time I made this presentation, I had a picture of this fly that I took in the Northeast, and somebody said, "Does that fly really live in Texas?" And I was like, "Oh, my picture's not from Texas, but they do." And then 3 days later, there he was in my yard. There's also one with pretty cool eyes. This is the common lagoon flies. Feeds in marshy waters and other slow-moving waters. So, but not the adult. So the adults don't spend that much time in the muck. She lays her eggs and then she comes back to the flower to nectar and just says, "Oh, I'm just a nice little sweet fly." This is the common compost fly. It is said to be a honeybee mimic because it has this thick femur and a little orange dot there. So that's imitating the corbicula and a little pollen carrying. I don't know. I think that's a stretch, but that's what they say. It's another decomposer, compost and silage and manure. Also with a thick hind femur is this member of the Restolinae, which found in logs and stumps. And this picture was taken at Lila. But this fly is rarely found east of the Mississippi. But it's very interesting. If you go out to the Blackjack Trail at Lila, there are several species of insects that are from further east, but somehow they blow in or their eggs are brought in by birds or whatever. And the Blackjack Forest is just a place for them to survive. I think that's pretty cool. Here's another shot that I feel lucky to have, and this one again in my own yard. This is mimicry again. This is an ant mimic. You're like, ant? That looks nothing like an ant. Well, this again is not a visual mimicry. It is the larvae live in the nests and feed on the eggs of ants. So they avoid detection by mimicking the ant pheromones. So it's a chemical mimicry. And this is a different, so we've moved to a different family in the Syrphidae, subfamily in the Syrphidae family. This is the, already forgotten, oh, Microdontinae. And it's a very small subfamily that all live in ant nests. So we have two predator feeding species or subfamilies in the Syrphidae and one decomposing family. So we're going to move on to another predator family. This is the Midas fly. Might be mistaken for a wasp. It has wasp warning colors, and they hover on the ground sort of like spider hunting wasps do, and they also have brown wings that mimic wasps. But they are looking to, she's looking to lay her eggs so that her larvae can eat soil-dwelling insects. June beetle larvae are our favorite of Midas flies, so that's pest control again. And once she lays her eggs, or even before, she will go fly off to a flower. And that's how she gets her energy as an adult. Here's another mistaken identity. But these are both flies. The Midas fly on the left has a very smooth body, very smooth legs. The fly on the right has very spiky legs, and it's got a very hairy face. Well, this is a robber fly. It's a full-on predator as an adult and as larva. It has leg hairs to help it aid in capturing its prey. It also has face hairs to keep that prey from flailing and damaging his lovely face. They are good at catching prey on the fly. This robber fly is eating a eastern amberwing dragonfly, almost its size. They can also take medium-sized prey. This fly is eating a stink bug. Yay. Yeah, pest control. They can also be small and take small prey. This in the genus Ceratania is 5 to 9 millimeters long. Members of this genus are known as the micropanthers. They take miniature prey, including small bees and wasps, but this one is eating a thrips there. And so we have a size for every niche. The beak can also siphon nectar, because a female will need both nectar and protein meal in order to lay her eggs. She will lay her eggs either in the soil or in bark or in grass sheaths. This is a robber fly out at Leela laying her eggs in the dry grass of yellow Indian grass. The food source for the larvae are soil-dwelling invertebrates and also invertebrate eggs. And part of the robber fly's evolutionary success is that the adult and the larva feed in different habitats. So you look at this and you think, well, is that a bee or is that a fly? So if it was a bumblebee, would it have this critter in its mouth? No. So that, I mean, you don't even have to look at what the insect is. You're like, no, I know it's not a bee, not a bumblebee, and that would be the kind of bee it was. And it's sitting on a leaf, so it doesn't have much interest in flowers. I mean, every once in a while it'll go get nectar, but they hang out on leaves because they're looking for their prey sitting that way. Another fly not very much interested in flowers. It's got a bug in its mouth, so it must be a predator. This is a little attractive family of flies called the Dolichopodidae. They're commonly known as the long-legged flies. Robber flies you'll find in drier areas. The Dolichopodid you'll find in wetter areas. You see these, I see these when I take a walk in my neighborhood, well-watered lawns. So they're living in more wet areas. Both the larvae and adults are predators. The larvae feed on small invertebrates, and not that this guy's not feeding on a small invertebrate, but all those insects, their size range is from little to a little bigger. Now these flies have yet a different way of eating, whereas the robber fly, oh, I forgot to tell you about the robber fly's eating. The robber fly eats by sticking its proboscis into its prey. It injects it with saliva, which has peptides in it, which paralyze the prey and also liquefy the inside of that other insect. And so this is another good reason for insects to have like that hard exoskeleton, because it's a little vessel for its predators to drink from. But this fly, they all got to eat, right? This fly has slightly different mouth parts, usual for a fly. It has serrated mouth parts, and it masticates its prey and then uses sponging mouth part to lick up the food, the protein. So, and it's just, yeah, got to eat. Some people say they are mimics of green bees, but I don't really think they're mimics. And besides that, they also hang out on leaves. So they're looking for their prey, not necessarily on the flowers, but those things that crawl around on leaves. And the robber fly hangs out on a leaf and then darts out and takes something off the flower. But every once in a while, you see one hanging out on a little flower. And every once in a while, you see a bee hanging out on a leaf. So, there is no always. They have, wrong way, they have interesting mating rituals, and they also have, the males are going to be more decorated than the females. You notice these flattened tarsi, which is the last segment of the foot there. That's the bigger the flattened tarsi, the better the mate, so they say. But it looks like he has dancing shoes on. And these are just really, really colorful flies. You have bronze, you have striped, you have multicolored, and then you have this beautiful, beautiful blue fly. Now that one is in Texas, but pretty much South Texas. I've seen a few of them in the Metroplex, but they're more of a South kind of insect. Not all flies with long legs, however, are Dolichopodidae. We have also the dance flies in the family Empididae. They are also, the adults are carnivorous and feeding on other insects, but the larvae may eat decaying matter, although some are predatory. These adults, the male provides a nuptial gift for the female. She doesn't really hunt, so they have to get some protein somehow, so the male brings it to her as part of the mating ritual. This is another variation in the long legs theme. This is a fly in the family Mycopesidae, commonly known as the stilt-legged flies. This fly imitates the behavior of little ichneumon wasps. Sometimes if you see on leaves, you'll see these little wasps running around that parasitize other insects. This fly imitates that wasp. The wasp will have these long antennae, and they have this white segment. The fly has a white segment on the end of its front legs, which it waves around like, oh, I'm a big bad wasp with my antenna out here. Oh, but wait, I only have 2 legs. Yeah. But in addition to predators in the fly order, we have a lot of parasitoids. You know, predators eat their meal, dispose of it very quickly, and they eat it. Parasitoids preserve their host for long-term feeding. Usually, it's usually the larval stage that is doing the feeding, but the parent may either find the prey for the larva or, again, lay her egg as close as possible. And then parasitoids will consume non-essential parts first, but eventually the whole prey will be consumed. The tachinidae, commonly known as the bristle flies, are all internal parasitoids as larvae. And they're not the most colorful flies, but they do have some orange and red and black flies. Diversity of shapes and patterns, a diversity of hosts. Larvae parasitize moths and butterflies are the most common, but beetles and true bugs may also be the host. But the pattern is that the host is usually a plant-eating insect. So the female may either lay her eggs on the host, so they hang around the plants. They might nectar, but they're also looking for a place to oviposit their eggs. She may use a long ovipositor to insert her eggs into the body of the host, or she may just lay eggs near feeding hosts. So you got a little plant bug going along, yum, yum, yum. And then it's like, oops, I probably shouldn't have eaten that. Too late. I include this fly because this fly doesn't look very, you know, it's kind of nondescript in some ways, but it's funny that it's kind of hard to take a bad picture of this. And it's one of the ones that is actually easiest to identify also. There's a lot of tachnid flies on iNaturalists, you know, tachnid fly, but this is a Archytas epicifer, commonly known as the hornworm tachnid fly, that with the larva would be internal parasites of the hornworms. So I guess that's pest control, right? These are the feather-legged flies, another pretty easy to identify group of flies. They are, the genus is Trichopoda, which means hairy foot, tricha, hairy, poda, foot. And there's Trichopoda plumipes, Trichopoda pinnipes, Trichopoda lanipes. Plumipes meaning feather, pinnipes meaning wing, and lanipes meaning woolly. So you got this hairy woolly foot, hairy feather foot, hairy, it's like the scientists were trying to figure out all the different ways they could name a fly with feather legs. The adults also like to consume, this is another fly that likes to consume the minerals on your hand. Another kiss by a fly. You can see that sponging mouth part. So as an aside, I will advise that you do need to get comfortable with some basic fly ID to let them land on you and continue to dab on you. Because you know, some flies leave behind germs and some do bite, but many do not. And once you're comfortable with it, it's fun. That's your.
Don't panic. Do not panic.
Do not panic. Any questions so far?
Nobody panic.
Yay, save the day. Yay. So this next fly looks like you might not want it to land and kiss you because it has this very long, stiff proboscis. And so we're now moving on to the Bombylidae, the bee flies. These are known for their imitating bees. They're actually named for their buzzing, not for being a mimic of a bumblebee. But this fly has this long proboscis it uses to get nectar out of the longer flowers. This is a greater bee fly. These, in the spring, you see these flies lay very close to the ground, because they are looking for, to lay their eggs in the ground of ground nesting wasp and other bees and other insects. So the adult will, I'm going to show you a different one. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this. So the adult will like hover close to the ground, not only to lay eggs, but before she lays eggs, she's going to pick up sand or pebbles to coat her eggs. That way, when she dive bombs the bee nest or wasp nest, it will have enough heft to make it to the target, and she will have done a good job. And they also kind of camouflage the eggs. And then the larva will hatch and she will crawl into the nest. And there will be external parasitoids. When the eggs hatch, they attach themselves to the host larva and slowly consume. And then they overwinter in the bee's nest. So they got food and warmth all out of invading a bee's nest. This is one of the larger of the flies. This is a tiger bee fly. I've had them land on me too, and it's pretty cool because they don't bite or sting. But they hang out on wooden bridges, near fence posts, railroad ties, because they are parasitoids of carpenter bee larvae. So they are up to 1.25 inches long. They look menacing, but they're actually pretty harmless and pest control. So the bee flies are another pretty diverse family of flies. The 3 flies in the lower right are very, very tiny. You know, maybe 0.5 centimeter, 5 millimeters. And then they range all the way up to the size of this tiger bee fly. They also have a wide range of food choices, from bees and wasps to grasshoppers, beetles, caterpillars, and armyworms and cutworms, all good pest control. Some are hyperparasites. They're parasites of other parasites, such as the enumiid wasps and the tachnid flies. And some are kleptoparasites. So remember my favorite animal? Scaly bee fly. It is a kleptoparasite of paralyzed prey of twig nesting solitary wasp. Perhaps it evolved from eating caterpillars, and then one day it's like, well, hey, this one's already preserved. And then that helps us move on to other kleptoparasites, freeloaders and hitchhikers. So if you remember the, oh, no. Okay. This photo, probably shouldn't tell the scaly bee fly because it is my favorite, but this probably maybe it planted a seed of curiosity in me about flies. This is like one of the very first nature photos that I took. This is even before I even knew about iNaturalist. I was at the Connemara Meadow and I was like, what is that bug with a wheel on its head that looks like a dinosaur? That's what caught my eye. And then I'm like, and it's eating a bumblebee, honeybee. Then I got home and I said, whoa, there's a fly on the wheel. And I couldn't, I didn't even know the words to use the internet to figure out, although I did search for insect with a wheel that looks like a dinosaur and came up with wheel bug. So I thought that was pretty good. But then it was like fly on the wheel of a wheel bug, nothing. So I asked Sam Kieschnick a couple of years later, and he's like, well, I don't know, but I have a friend. So he asked his friend. 3 months later, he got back to me and he says, it's a freeloader fly. So the freeloader fly will hang about on other assassin bugs, and I'll show you in a second, praying mantis. And they just kind of hang out and wait for the juices to start flowing. And then they have a very long proboscis. And they get down there right where the the main predator has its proboscis in the prey, and they just stick their proboscis in there and suck up what the so they don't have to have an enzyme to liquefy the bee. They just go get the leftovers, and it's really a commensal relationship with the wheelbug. But you also see them hanging out on praying mantis. There's actually two here. There's the honeybee and there's the praying mantis. And then also on this robber fly, stink bug prey. So they're just, they just hang around and get a meal based on somebody else's enzymes. Yeah, there you go. And the larvae feed on decaying matter. So there you go. And then a couple years later, when I saw this, and I saw these, and I thought, oh, it's freeletter fly. Got home, put on iNat. No, it is a lesser dung fly. So these flies are not there to get their meal off the dung beetle. They're actually there for the dung pile. But they will ride away with the beetle because they're not very good flyers, so that's how they disperse. And so here we have a movie of this. We're going to see the dung beetle. So the dung beetle's rolling. But the Sapphiroceridae, those lesser dung flies, are not the only flies on the dung pile. You got a Califoridae flying back and forth. The Califoridaes, interested in the dung, not necessarily the roll. And then at the very end, you see a Sarcophagidae fly, and we'll talk about the Califoridae and the Sarcophagidae in a minute, why one's earlier than the other. But it's just, yeah, seems gross, but this is a job that somebody has to do. And if you have pasture or you live in an area like Africa where there are lots of elephants, dung beetles and dung flies are very important. Gross and important. And speaking of gross but important, okay, whether dung or vegetation, flies are prolific decomposers. The Stratomyidae, also commonly known as the soldier flies, are commercially important decomposers of food scraps and agricultural waste. They are well studied because they are commercially important. They can break down compost really fast. Their frass or their poop, it makes very good fertilizer, and then fattened up larvae make very good chicken and feed for other animals. So they're an all-around good fly. There are businesses that raise soldier flies for all three of those purposes. And as in certain parts of the world, those larvae are a very important protein source for humans. So they're just an all-around good fly. This is the adult. Some people say it looks like a wasp mimic. It does have dark wings. If you look at it from the side, these little plates on its abdomen kind of make it look like create an optical illusion that it might be a wasp. And it does have kind of soldier flies have longer antennae. This is another decomposing fly. You might see these out and about right this time of year. This is it was a good decomposer and otherwise harmless fly. It's called a picture wing fly. It's in the same group of flies as fruit flies, and they consume decaying plant matter. And they are not considered to be pest or disease vectors. So soldier flies, picture wing flies, but we cannot say that about all flies. Which brings us to our complicated relationship with flies. You have biting flies like mosquitoes, horse flies, and then you have house flies. So the mosquitoes and biting flies can bite us and our domesticated animals, and even worse, they can carry disease from animal to animal. The filth flies, like the flesh flies and the house flies, bottle flies, carry disease from rotting carrion and dung to our kitchens and our food because they want to eat both. On the left, this mosquito is the Aedes aegypti, the species that potentially carries a number of tropical diseases. It's a stealth biter. They actually have a little antiseptic they use first before they bite you. You still feel the bite after a while, but they get their proboscis in you long enough to get a little blood meal. They need a blood meal so that they can lay their eggs. The deer fly in the middle has a little bit different way of drawing blood. It doesn't have a proboscis. It's still got a sponging mouth part, so it's got to draw blood. So it has serrated mouth parts, and that's the bite. They're not really big disease carriers, but they can carry some disease, and it just hurts. The housefly on the right feed on rotting meat, and then they come and want to eat the meat on your sandwich. So in order to liquefy their food source, either the rotting meat or your sandwich, they have to regurgitate some enzymes in order to be able to sponge it up. And that's how they're carrying diseases. So that is to say that not all flies are good. But species-wise, less than 2% of them are problematic. But a lot of these flies have huge numbers within, in their species, or just huge numbers of that fly species. So it's a problem, and it's complicated. It makes it complicated for how you deal with those pests when you don't want to kill all the good ones. But I like to look at it this way, and we can learn from insects about how they manage problems and predators and pests. They target their eradication. They use avoidance and barriers. And so our targeting pest control efforts, we can use targeted tools and even insects. There's a lot of insects that will eat other insects that are used in farming to control the bad insects. We can avoid insects by the clothing we wear, the screens on our doors, and by chemical barriers and property maintenance. So just like we manage for flowers instead of weeds, we can strive to manage for good insects instead of bad while not killing them all, because we need the jobs that the good ones do. And it is a balance, because further complicated by the fact that some of these bad flies actually do some good as well. So besides decomposing, flies in the Calliphoridae family with the bottle flies famously can help solve crimes by providing clues about time of death. So it takes this fly, they have these charts that have temperature and humidity, and they can say, well, it took the fly about this long to find the body. It took it about this long in those conditions to lay an egg, and about this long for the egg to hatch, and about this time for those larvae to go through their stages. So, but it's not like on TV where they can say, look, Your Honor, the fly says the time of death was 11:59. I think he's convicted. It's more like, it's a range of time, maybe between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. So take it to the jury. And sterile grade larvae of the different species of Calliphoridae are famously used to remove necrotic tissue from a human wounds. Still done today in medicine, gross but important. After some guy finally figured out that they really needed to be sterile. And then fruit flies in the family Drosophilidae have been beneficial in gene research. So we got a lot of good flies. And not even all mosquitoes are bad. This Leela resident is the elephant mosquito. It's a very large mosquito, and people think size means that they're more dangerous, right? But this adult feeds on carbohydrates because the larvae have fed on the larvae of other mosquitoes. They got all their protein as a larva, so she's just a lovely little mosquito flying around nectaring. And they actually provide mosquito control. And also, not all insects that look like a mosquito are. This is the crane fly. It's not a mosquito. It's often mistaken for one. And also, people falsely claim that these are mosquito hawks and that they eat mosquitoes, and they don't. They hardly even eat anything as adults. And there's other confusions. Not all flies are flies. Not all flies are Diptera, so to say. Flies that are not. A sawfly is not a fly. A mantis fly, a sawfly is actually in the same family group as the wasp and bees, sawflies and ants. Hymenoptera, yeah. No, sawflies, not ants. Sawflies, bees and wasps. A mantis fly is not a fly. They're in the same family as Neuroptera, related to the green lacewings. Dragonflies, damselflies, butterflies, caddisflies, and owl flies, scorpion flies, and others. The point is that flies, when you see an insect name, the common name, all one word, butterfly, caddisfly, damselfly, it's not a fly. One word flies are not flies. They fly, but they're not flies. They're not true Diptera. So if the real flies have two wings and two words. So you all as Master Naturalists, maybe not confused by that, but I had this conversation with my mother about butterflies not being a fly. And I was surprised that she didn't know, because she was a pretty good naturalist. But and also, not all two-winged insects are Diptera. I was shocked to learn this. The Strepsiptera are parasites of other insects, as are flies, but their hall tears are up front rather than behind the wings. And they have those funky eyes, and they have these funky antennae as well. Thought to have evolved from beetles. They don't live long. Only the males have wings. The females spend all their life inside their host and don't have wings. So just so let's see if you recognize the flies now. So if we review, okay. So is it a fly? Is it a fly? Is it a fly? Is it a fly? Yes. Yes, this is a Tupulidae, the crane fly, crane fly. Is this a fly? No. No, it's a bee. That's like a halictid bee. Fly. Fly. Okay, bonus question. Fly? Not a fly. This was, no, okay. So this is not a Texas fly either. This is a beetle fly. You know, when I was doing all this, and I was like, I just have to know, is there a fly that imitates a beetle? And yes, there is. And just, it's two words. It's the beetle fly. Oh, and two insects in one. So the shell covering the wings is actually just an extension of its pronotum, and it doesn't have a line down the middle of it like a beetle would. And I mean, good golly, look at that sponging mouth part. That's the big clue right there. So, you know, and insects are amazingly varied, yet so related, and upon closer inspection, inspire curiosity and admiration. I get a lot of joy out of the beautiful colors and patterns and just watching them. The way they are adapted, watching them sponge nectar, wait for prey, catch prey, do their cleanup routine. So if you ever want to talk about the amazingness of the Diptera, I'm your person. 10 years ago, I didn't know very much about insects, much less flies. These are some of the books that I have used to learn about flies. There's only one really good fly guide. This one right here, the Field Guide to the Flower Flies of Northeastern North America. Even though it says Northeastern North America, if the fly lives here, the range maps will cover it in this book. It's a really good guide. The robber fly guide is pretty good. It's based on drawings. This is a huge tome, lots of information about flies, good pictures, but not really a guide. And these two books, and you can look at them up here, are just treatises on the behaviors of flies and the morphology of flies. I also listen to podcasts and participate with Bug Guide and iNaturalist. There are two brothers who live in the Northeast that developed this field guide ID for photos. It's available online. It was designed to be used with iNaturalist, designed to be used with photographs of flies rather than specimen in hand. And it's a pretty good guide. Still hard, but and my favorite podcast is the Arthropod podcast. And I have a resource list that I can send you. I have a copy of it up here if you want to look at it, that lists all these things and more of how I learned about insects. So don't be fooled by thinking a fly is not a fly. Don't be fooled by the pest into thinking that they're all pests. Don't be fooled by the habits of just the adults. And don't be fooled by thinking flies don't serve any useful purpose. Because we've talked about it: pollination, decomposition, pest control, nutrient recycling, and crime scene evidence, food for insects up the food chain. So they're just a joy. And I am very happy that you shared my joy tonight. Thank you. No, just, yeah, I sweat. Okay. She asked, do I put fly food on my hands? And I said, no, I just sweat. Is there? Oh, the question was, how do I get such clear pictures? They're so tiny. You know what? I take a lot of those are iPhone pictures. Here's my list of cameras right here that I've used. So I've been taking them since I had an iPhone 6, and I will tell you, iPhone 7 was the best phone for taking insect pictures ever. I wish I'd kept it, but I've learned their behaviors a little bit, and I know how to watch them to see what they might do. I know that they'll fly away pretty fast. I got to get in gear to get the fly, but I take a lot of pictures and the iPhone, you know, the focus is moving it back and forth, and you just keep moving and clicking, moving and clicking. And you just try to keep your shadow off of them so they don't fly away. I mean, those are my tricks right there. And it just takes a lot of practice. So he wanted to know, we hear a lot about how you attract native bees to your yard. How do we attract native flies? You know, that's a complicated thing, but you know, a lot, the pretty flies, the flower flies, the hover flies will come in for flowers. Of course, that will come in if you have aphids, but they're coming in because you have their food source. So the decomposing flies, you know, your mulch, they will go for, you know, if you have, you know, things that you want in your garden that would also decompose over time, bring them in. Yeah, well, that's going to bring the flies you don't really want. That is kind of a problem. And the other thing is, you probably have some of them there already. You just don't know. You just don't notice them because they're not always on flowers. They're on leaves and they're on stems, and but it's basically the same type of stuff that would attract bees. But you have to think about what their food source is. And then you have to think about, what do I really want it? Do I really want a tiger bee fly? Because do I really want to have carpenter bees around? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Thank you.
Appreciate you coming and being with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
I'm gonna take the mic
You're gonna take my mic.
and spin this way and I'll get the back.